Economic inequalities and how to reduce them. Economic inequalities exist in America and other well-developed countries, as well as in underdeveloped countries where the poverty levels are at an all-time low, because the income of the working people has not increased in the last 50 years. Economic inequalities exist in societies at a global level. Opportunity is affected by privileged and underprivileged factors. Americans as well as the rest of the world face inequalities between classes and countries, which affect their population. The middle class squeeze is a modern concept that affects societies across the globe, but especially Americans. The presentation describes and discusses these economic inequality factors and will conclude with the solution to decrease economic inequality. Is economic inequality good or bad? Barford and Dorling explain that it is almost never discussed that inequality affects the poor as well as the rich. They explain that some argue that inequality affects the rich in a psychological manner. This is due to the high number of depression and paranoia among the privileged. Richard Wilkinson's presentation supports the argument that inequality affects society in a negative manner, in correlation with income inequalities within a given society. In his presentation, Wilkinson shows that in countries in which the income inequality is greater, crime rate, mental illness, academics, and obesity are all worse than in countries where economic inequality is less significant. In contrast, countries with less economic inequality have a better chance of upward mobility, less teenage births, and less infant mortality rates. Nonetheless, child well-being is also better in countries where the economic inequalities are less significant. Child well-being has to do with the relationships between children and parents, time spent with children, literacy building at home, and whether or not children develop early social problems such as bullying at school. With so many negative societal effects, how can inequality be good? Barford and Dorling explain that some argue that inequality is also good because it promotes better use of resources, motivates the population, it stimulates competition, and that it rewards those who work hard. According to President Obama, Americans and their children will have a hard time believing that argument, since most Americans believe that no matter how hard they work, they will never move up in society. Underprivileged and overprivileged. Children born into the top 20% of the economic bracket have a 2 in 3 chance of staying at the top, while children born into the bottom 20% of the economic bracket have a less than 1 in 20 chance of making it to the top. In other words, it is harder for children born in poverty to achieve upward mobility than it is for children whom are born into wealthy families. Children whom are born into wealthy families are predetermined to succeed, while the rest is predetermined to fail. The privileged/overprivileged may have the opportunity to start an early education, attend better schools, receive tutoring, prepare for college, and attend Ivy graduate schools. In contrast, underprivileged kids experience death as infants, can't afford to attend preschool, attend public schools with declining test scores, teenage pregnancy, and resort to minimum wage occupations because healthcare and education is too expensive. U.S. inequalities. In a recent speech, President Obama stated that most Americans believe that the odds of becoming wealthy are stacked against them. Most Americans believe it's very difficult to purchase a home. Most Americans also believe that their children will experience the same economic difficulties. Further, President Obama stated that Americans' basic bargaining is in jeopardy due to a dangerously growing economic inequality, and that no matter how hard Americans work, they will not have a chance to get ahead or attain upward socioeconomic mobility. Part of the American dream is that everyone is created equal. However, not everyone attains the same results. Subsequently, the Obama administration is working to make sure that everyone gets the same opportunity to succeed and move up in society. The Obama administration is working to let Americans understand that they don't have to be born into wealth to have upward mobility. Global economic inequalities. Just as economic inequalities exist in America, inequalities also exist globally. Bob Owens and Turner explain in their text that wealth is distributed unequally around the world. Most valuable resources are held by industrialized societies such as Europe, The United States, Japan, and Singapore. Valuable resources are categorized as economic wealth, opportunities for education, and lifestyle. Industrialized countries are at the top, while at the bottom are over 1 billion people who live on less than $1 a day. In the last 50 years, the income of most people in industrialized countries has tripled. However, in the rest of the world, the income of the middle class has not changed, adding to economic inequality in society. A more dramatic effect of global economic inequality affects the percentage of infant deaths. Bob Owens and Turner explain that economic inequalities have a great impact on society. The impact affects the ratio of infant deaths in a distinct and global manner. For example, the ratio of infant deaths between the poorest and richest country is different by almost 100 per thousand children born. In contrast, women in less developed countries only live to be about 40 years old, while in more developed countries women live to be about 80 years old. The middle class squeeze, according to President Obama. A factor that adds to the economic inequality in America is that current jobs pay less and offer fewer benefits. Less pay and fewer benefits add to the economic condition called the middle class squeeze. Residents in Maine and Oregon have been experiencing the middle class squeeze since the late 90s. In a newspaper article, staff writer Murphy explains that, even though residents in Oregon and Maine are not among the lowest earners in the country, however, they are experiencing the middle class squeeze because housing prices are too high, which makes renting an apartment almost impossible as well. High housing costs along with high health care costs leave Americans with less spendable cash. Causes of economic Barford and Dorling explain that however controversial the issue may be, two of the reasons why inequalities exist is because the rich use their power to stay in a privileged state. The second reason is that financial institutions such as the United Nations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and World Trade Organization are skewed to favor the rich and powerful. Such financial institutions set and handle regulations for currencies around the world. Global monetary inequalities are the result of how much currencies are worth, which translates to the power and privilege of whole countries. Brio proposes a reformist argument, which states that education is embedded to promote economic inequality. Brio's proposal states that even though education is the surest way to success, education is designed to keep poor people at the bottom. Schools reward students' obedience and passiveness while discouraging spontaneity and creativity. How to reduce economic inequalities. Legislation such as what's being enforced by the Obama administration targets to reduce problems faced by children, which prevent them from receiving a quality education. Currently, children in public schools are provided a free meal per day. Some of the meals are provided inside the classroom to maximize the time in which children learn. Simultaneously, the free meal also reduces the stress and inability to concentrate caused by an empty stomach in the morning. President Obama's legislation also targets the problems caused by poor health care. Improper health care may cause children to miss too many days out of the school year. Simple sickness may into more complex conditions when going untreated. A healthy kid with food in their stomach may have a better chance of learning and succeeding than a hungry, sick child. This is how the Obama administration is trying to equalize the education opportunity between the working and middle class. Brio explains that another way to reduce economic inequalities would be to adopt concepts such as the critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy is a concept that suggests that people at the bottom are usually unaware of the economic, cultural, and political statuses. The concept suggests implementing ways of teaching, which make students more aware of their socioeconomic status. The new teachings would also help to identify factors implemented in the system, which perpetuate oppression and economic disparity. Legislation, which tries to equalize economic inequities, and concepts such as the critical pedagogy, are ways in which economic inequalities may be reduced.